music, please? It's cool, it's groovy, but we'll do the presentation music free. Hello, and welcome to Networking for Introverts. We're just gonna dive right in. I'll introduce myself in case you haven't heard of me. My name is Stephanie Thoma. I'm the author of a book called Confident Introvert. It's based on hosting 1,000 networking events in San Francisco. And I'm also a podcast host of Holistic Ambition, redefining what it means to be successful with more well-being, meaning, and fun. I also host a meetup in this room right here. It's called Holistic Ambition. And we have a couple of fun events coming up that I'll mention later. And I've also recently moved to Austin in the last year. Who else is new to Austin? Let's say 3 months or less, 6 months or less, 1 year or less. Okay, 10 years or less? Okay, anyone more than that? Okay, cool. Wow, so everyone's relatively new. Okay. So basically I've given a variation of this workshop probably like 200 times, I would say, a combination of like virtual, but I added a few fun slides for you all that are more entrepreneurially focused. So who here is an entrepreneur? Okay, awesome, or aspiring? Awesome. So yeah, we have some fun stuff coming up towards the end, but this is kind of what I'm up to today, modern day. Here we are, 2023. However, was not always exactly like this. Maybe you can relate. So, growing up, a frequently asked question was, why are you so quiet? Has anyone else ever been asked that? And then how do you respond? Maybe silence, right? I think that's fitting. But yeah, also kind of painfully shy. And we'll go into this in a little bit. Being painfully shy is not the same thing as introversion. There is a difference. But yeah, I felt oftentimes a little bit lost in the shuffle, one of 5 kids, and I was also a serial monogamist in friendship. I was like, you know what, this friendship thing, one is enough. I'm just gonna do this, that's fine. So what we will cover in this workshop, in about this order, will be introversion. We'll talk a little bit about personality, where it comes from. If you are wondering if you're actually an introvert, there's a way that you can decipher if you actually are one. And then we'll go into different networking tips and ways that you can prepare for events. Then we'll also go into event approaches in action, how you can make the most of your contacts that you've made after the event has ended. And then last but not least, community building and public speaking. So to start out with, are there any extroverts in the room with us? All right, see, totally fine. There are always at least, maybe one, because people are curious. Wait, we were saying this right before. People that want to understand the introverts in their life better sometimes come here, but it's usually primarily introverted. And, what do you think Beyonce is? Do you think she's an extrovert? Raise your hand. Do you think she's an introvert? Raise your hand. Okay, so Beyonce herself is an introvert. However, her alter ego, Sasha Fierce, have you heard of Sasha Fierce? Yep. She is an extrovert. She thrives on the crowd. And, we'll talk a little bit later about our level of introversion or extroversion being contingent upon context, right? Maybe when you're with your best friend, you're enlivened by it. And then maybe when you're at an event, there could be some social anxiety that comes up, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to go now. So, it's not all. Who here is an introvert? Okay, great. And then actually, there's one term that we haven't really talked about yet, who's an ambivert. And who knows what an ambivert is? Who's like, wait, I'm not totally sure what that is? Okay, so an ambivert, it essentially means that you have access to being introverted or extroverted depending on the situation that you're in. And I would actually say, even though I'm the author of a book called Confident Introvert, most people, myself included, are ambiverted. Unless you are a cartoon character where everything either makes you come alive or everything depletes you, no, we're multifaceted beings. So usually it's just percentage driven, right? Maybe 60-40, maybe it's something like 70-30. And over time, it can shift. You may find that over time, maybe your level of introversion was a little bit conflated. So we'll go into that later so you can know if you actually are an authentic introvert. And now we're going to go into a way that you can self-assess. This is the first self-assessment. So this is from a book that I think is a good one, Networking for People Who Hate Networking. And to break it down simply, introverts tend to think to talk. So this is why when you ask someone who's an introvert a question, there may be a pause. And it's not that they don't know the answer. Maybe they actually know it right away, but they're processing internally to know the right words to say, and then it gets to come out and be shared with others. On the other side, people who are more extroverted tend to talk to think. So maybe they're actually processing, they could know the answer, they could not if they're asked a question, but you're gonna get the full picture. You're going to hear the internal monologue that maybe introverts are more likely to keep to themselves. And introverts do tend to go deep and be specialists in certain things. Maybe they have a certain collection of things. Maybe they are creative in a certain capacity and make a lot of music, hanging out by themselves, doing that. Or on the other end, experts tend to go wide and be jacks and Jills of all trades. So these are the people that are more likely to be kind of dabbling and just finding a lot of joy and excitement in a greater variety of things. And this is a little bit overly simplistic. If you're an introvert, goodness, you have more than one interest, okay? But just this kind of can help people with kind of contextualizing what people are more likely to veer towards. And, when we talk about our energy, who here tends to be aware of their energy almost like a battery? Yeah, so it's like, let's say that you are at an event. Have you ever had the experience of maybe you're like, okay, I'm having fun. This is going pretty well. And then all of a sudden, you're done. You hit the wall, kind of like the Energizer Bunny that's go, 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 go. And then, just like completely paused. So introverts do tend to energize by themselves, doing solitary activities. A little bit later, we'll go into different things that you can do to maximize your energy so that you can be present during things like an event, during things like giving a talk, and things like that. And when it comes to extroverts' energy, they are more likely to energize in social activity. So it's the sort of thing where, during recent events, when we were all spending a lot of time inside by ourselves maybe, there was this meme that I thought was pretty on point where it showed this person who was illuminated, and it said introverted battery overcharged. It got to the point where so many of us were like, wait, we are still social beings, let's get out there. But you can only imagine how the extroverts were feeling in that situation. And this is when we dive a little deeper. So if you identify as being introverted, where did it come from? So there is this concept that I like to bring up. It's a pretty tried and true concept from the 1800s by Francis Galton. It's the nature versus nurture debate. Who has heard of this? So there's the idea that when it comes to your introversion, it could be your nature, it could be an inherited trait, and this can also be known as being someone who's highly empathetic. Does anyone here identify as an empath, kind of absorbing the energies around you? You're kind of like a sponge. Or someone who's really sensitive. Maybe, let's say there are some bright lights and you're just like, I'd rather not have that there. Or there's a loud noise, you're like, oh gosh, like now I feel really rattled. Or caffeine is a big one. You're kind of shaking, you're like, wow, some people actually feel energized by this. I just feel like I am about to spaz out. It can also alternatively be something that was learned. So let's say that there was bullying at school and you learned, wait, I put myself out there and then people made fun of me. F that. Let me just not do that again, right? Or maybe things in your home environment. So these are things, we don't need to get too deep into them in this moment, but if this is striking a chord, I would encourage you to journal about it later tonight. And here are some prompts that I would encourage you, if you want to, let's say, get the notes app of your phone and just jot down your initial impressions. And you can continue this later, but I think it's fun to kind of get the wheels turning to write down one way that nature or nurture has contributed to your level of introversion. So no matter how you identify, if you want to go ahead and write down that one thing, how you feel about it, how it has shaped your relationships with others. Do you wish you could change it? Why or why not? And what's one way that being introverted empowers you? So I'm gonna just give us about 1 minute to do that. So stream of consciousness, first thing that comes to mind, no right or wrong answer. I would say 1 sentence or less per question. You can always revisit later if you feel like contemplating that a little bit further. There's no right or wrong answer. Just the first thing that pops in your head is great. We'll take about 15 more seconds. And when you're done with that last question, feel free to look at me and then I'll know. Okay? Great. Okay, if you just want to wrap up that last thought that you're on, and while, let's say some of us are wrapping up that question, does anyone want to share one way that nature or nurture has contributed to their level of introversion? Is anything coming up? Yeah, in the back.
I was the youngest kid of a big family, but way younger than everybody else. So I was always kind of, they left the house, and I was basically the only child for a little bit. So maybe that had something to do with it. But
yeah, I mean that's an insight that I'm sure you've thought of before tonight, where growing up and maybe having a large age gap, where you essentially, or maybe who here is an only child? Or who here comes from a large family? Yeah, so spending a lot of time on your own and then being like, well, this is a part of my identity now. This is a part of my personality. All right, anyone else have something to add? Yes?
Yeah, I'm also one of 5, and interestingly enough, I'm like the third, like I'm the middle child, and I feel like that really contributed to me being an ambivert, because I then picked who I like amongst the people who I'm like, I think we have less interest and things like that. That also made me really observant. So I feel like being somewhere in the middle, I get to think and act, but sometimes I still need to think loudly too, so I guess the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's an interesting tie-in, where being the middle child and being like, well, personality, maybe it's a construct at a soul level. Is that us? Maybe not. So taking on a little bit of both. Okay, very cool. And anyone have one more thing to add before we move on? So there is some rhetoric out there that has gone to an extreme that kind of puts down the introvert or the extrovert, right? How many people grew up kind of thinking that being an introvert was kind of a negative thing? Right? So a movement that's happened in recent years is like, actually, introverts are the best thing ever. And in fact, they're better than everyone else. When it's like, I'm gonna take a different stance. Maybe you can relate with this, where it's actually a yin and yang dynamic. The world needs our introverts, the world needs our extroverts, and we can coexist and we actually make the world function. And a prime example of this is and this is an example from Susan Cain's book, Quiet. Has anyone here read that? It's a good book. I would recommend that. And so we've heard of Apple computers. I hope you've heard of it. Yeah, you've heard of it. So there's Steve Jobs. Who's heard of Steve Jobs? Who's heard of Steve Wozniak? Okay, so it looks like slightly more people have heard of Steve Jobs, and then most people have heard of Steve Wozniak. However, Steve Jobs is the person who was the face of Apple, right? Giving all the talks, just, had his style down and had the executive presence and all of that. And then there was Steve Wozniak, who essentially made the tech function in the background. And we needed both Steves to make Apple function and be what it was. So that is just one example of so many examples that show that there's a time and a place for introverts and extroverts to even team up together and make something really amazing in the world. And now we're going to do an assessment, information that you may or may not have, and this has to do with when you were born. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of different birth stories. So baby A comes into the world out of the womb, super zen, just like a really zen, maybe even pleasant, happy baby. Just not really making a peep, just like, oh, is that baby okay? Yeah, they're chilling, they're fine. And then baby B, beet red face, flailing little limbs, screaming their head off. Which baby grows up to be the introvert? So show of hands if you think it's baby A. Okay, show of hands if you think it's baby B. Okay, it's a little split, but I will say that baby B is most likely to grow up to be the introvert, and I see some nods here, and it's because they're more sensitive to external stimuli. We talked about this a little bit earlier. So that baby that's like full of life and screaming, like you could be like, oh, life of the party baby, when really, no, that is a response where they are just like, they're not very happy and they don't have any inhibitions yet. So you're just, I mean, imagine it at networking events, we were all just screaming our heads off. Probably wouldn't go over so well, right? But that's what a baby does when they're really uncomfortable and when they're like, wait, what's going on? So yeah, if you don't have this information, I would encourage you to try to access it. You know, you can kind of learn to see what your baseline is, at least you know, on a certain level before being indoctrinated into society. And now we're going to go over some stats. So I conducted research, qualitative research, on this topic of young professionals who identified as introverts in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, and feel free to, show of hands, we'll go through a few of these if you kind of resonate with them a little bit. So 75% associate the term networking with anxiety or dread. And 31% attend events, but they really don't like it. 53% don't even attend events because they're afraid that it's really not going to be fun. Thanks for being here. And yet, 92% believe that networking is a valuable skill and that you got to do it. Yeah, everyone pretty much is raising their hand on that one. So there's a little bit of a contrast here. Okay, so it's something that's dreaded and like, oh, I have to do this, oh, I should do this, or maybe I'm not going to do this, like, oh, it's raining a little bit, and then, but you know what, we have to. So let's assess right now, and we're gonna, take our phones out again, or hey, if you have a notebook, that's cool, you can write this down as well. And we're going to take less than a minute, so I really encourage you to just not really overthink it. What is your biggest networking struggle? And just the first thing that comes to mind is totally fine, and it's always great to set an intention. So while you're here tonight, what is one thing that you'd like to learn, one thing that you'd like to get out of today? And then you can go ahead and just share that with your neighbor. Like, just quick conversation, the person next to you, let them know, the thing that you struggle with most and what you'd like to get out of today. So we're gonna take just another moment to write it down, and then when you start talking about this, you might even find that you have something in common, or especially when it comes to your goal, there's something that comes up. Okay, we'd like to start with, if you want to have just a group of 2, ideally we're even number, if not have a group of 3, and then we'll start with the first person, can just monologue and say one networking struggle in a sentence or less, and one intention, a sentence or less. I'll let you know when we move on to person 2. It's person 1 right now.
I use like the two things. I like social media messages.
you do have to like keep it going. And it's kind of hard
Right.
to like how do you like find these out there? Yeah. So it's kind of like it feels like that. Yeah, and it's like I want like to see them again somehow.
All right, person or question two, whichever one works. Person or question two begins now.
We're going to the second one. What would you like to go? Obviously, strategies. I think it's probably this one too. How to make the most of it.
Yeah, you're good.
Theater for 3 days? Oh my goodness, welcome, man.
All right, we'll wrap up that thought. And don't worry, we will have plenty of more opportunities to get to know each other. And now I would like to know just a few people, if you want to popcorn style, or you can raise your hand and be like, yes, some struggles that you would like to address. Yes.
As a host, I can't speak to every single person.
Okay. So either talking to every single person or being okay not doing that.
Your struggles of an extrovert.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Anyone else have a networking struggle that is top of mind?
I think when people aren't open or receptive when you're speaking with them, they like folks who perhaps cut you out of the group or make you feel anxious about where you are in your career. I think when you're trying to talk to someone and they see you as inferior and they have it on their face, that can be really, really like a letdown, and it's going to be very difficult depending on your personality to go back in there once you've experienced something like that.
Yeah, so perceiving or experiencing, these social cues, and you're like, wait, I think that means this, and then not feeling great, and then it sort of coloring other experiences. And I saw a hand over here, yes?
I work in a consulting industry, and so we have to do this constantly. At least I don't know, 5 more times we meet people every day as part of our work. And a lot of times, most of the time, maybe 90%, 95%, nothing comes up with these interactions. And so you just get tired, and you just get drained from putting your best self out there, and nothing catching. So it's just consuming that energy.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that going to events and being like, wow, I went to the event, I had the experience, and then nothing happened. So we will go into how to maximize the connections you make. And yeah, one more over here.
Mine is mainly just not having enough to say when I go to like a networking event, especially if I'm going into something like in the field I want to go into with my career, because like I'm still learning and I'm still new to the profession, and my biggest struggle is like these people know a lot more than me and I don't really have much to say.
Oh my gosh, we are literally addressing just that later on when it comes to transitioning industries and how you make conversation with people if you're potentially the only person that is not in that industry at an event that is industry specific. So thank you for bringing that one up. And now, what would you like to get out of today? There's such power in speaking your intentions out loud, writing them down too. But, I'd like to hear from someone who maybe hasn't spoken yet about an intention, something that you would like to get out of tonight. Yeah, you.
Oh, perfect. Sorry. Just like strategies to handle networking and get really the most out of it while not being superficial, I guess.
Yeah, so to feel authentic while you're making connections. Oh my gosh, yes, we will go into that. And over here.
Just learn different strategies and ways to be more inclusive of different people.
Ways to help other people feel more included. I love how that's kind of like, it touches on a pain point we talked about earlier where it's like, I don't really feel included. So how can you be that person that helps people feel included? Amazing. And how about we have time for one more intention? If you haven't spoken yet and you feel a little like, oh, I don't want to talk, maybe you could talk.
I get something out of a conversation, so it's not just like a one and done. It's like actually turn into something new.
Yeah. Awesome. So the intention is to make meaningful connections. And I actually think that you and everyone else in here can do that tonight. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And now we're going to have another opportunity to kind of just say in a word, this could be a feeling, it could be like a noun, a verb, I don't know, whatever you want. How do you define networking? When I say that word, what comes up for you? Earlier, I saw a few hands come up when you said anxiety and dread. Are there any other words that come up?
I would maybe it's a weird one, but friendship.
Friendship.
I think that, coming off your point, I think for me the biggest thing networking helped me out was instead of going in it with a big clear purpose, it's going to an event that already serves that purpose and making friends with a similar amount of people within that event. Because those are the people that are going to help you out. The people that are your friends that are in that job or are in that industry or whatnot. So that's what I like.
Beautiful. Okay, so friendship. And, I would say whether it's a positively skewed word, not so positive, it's all welcome here. Just sort of whatever comes up for you when you think of networking. Let's do one more. All right. Let's actually redefine networking. What is it? So this is according to dictionary.com. Great website. A supportive system of sharing information and services among individuals and groups having a common interest. It describes what we're even doing sitting here right now. So now we're going to move on into debunking networking falsities, things that people think are true but are not. So no shame if you think these things are true, but raise your hand if you either now or in the past have thought that you have to be super interesting in order to network. You're just like, I need to be way more interesting than I actually am. Okay, or talk to as many people as possible. Like a room of 100 people, you have to talk to every single one. Or that you have to go to all of the events. There are 3 events at night, great. Get ready to go to each one for 30 minutes until you go to the next. So yeah, just all of them. First, we're going to address this idea that you have to be interesting. So the most interesting man in the world, that does things, just maybe even for the sake of being able to tell the story. Maybe, no shade against people that do really cool things, but there's this idea that, people can get stuck in this loop of maybe wanting to appear interesting, doing things, not being present. So instead of doing something like that, being interested is actually what helps you connect with people so much more. And even in the mundane, there's this concept that I made up, called mundane miracles. Even the mundane, the fact that we are alive on this planet, it's all crazy. So be interested in people's lives, ask questions, and we'll go into how to ask the best questions in a bit. The next falsity is that you have to talk to as many people as possible. Who's looking at this image and kind of thinking, oh gosh, deep breath. Okay, we can even take a little deep breath right now. So, you can try to talk to everyone, but I am such an advocate of quality over quantity, and especially if you are reoccurring at an event series or if you host events. There's an opportunity, maybe you didn't talk to everyone in that one event, but there's an opportunity to go a little bit more deep with a few people. Or one person. I would even say if you were to have any goal at an event, this comes back to friendship. Make one new friend. So let's say there's a room full of 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people. It's like, all right, scavenger hunt, time to find someone I click with that feels like they could be my friend. And then this idea that you have to go to all of the events, analysis paralysis to the point where you're not actually paralyzed, you just go to all of them, and then you wonder, wait, why don't I like this? Why am I exhausted? So the idea here is to go to what's interesting to you. And if you are in the job market, or if you're an entrepreneur and you'd like to have a certain collaboration or partnership, sometimes you can find different collaboration opportunities at companies. For example, if you'd like to host a meetup at Capital Factory, maybe start going to a lot of Capital Factory meetups. That is an example. But also, when it comes to going to what interests you, I'll give an example from when I was working in consumer packaged goods, CPG. So I was working in CPG, but living in the Bay Area and thinking, how cool would it be to work in tech? That would just be really awesome. But I'm totally unqualified, and I don't understand technology that well, so how can I do this? So I started going to meetups and events and user research. I determined that, okay, that's where I want to go in the tech space, super interested in it. And although I didn't have a lot of industry knowledge at that point, I was going to panels, hearing speakers, speak their jargon, and meeting people that were in the field. And, there may be this idea that, when you're meeting people that are already in this, they might look at you and be like, why are you here? When actually, it added another layer of depth to the conversations that we could have because I had a different perspective. So maybe they had a user research client that, they were working on a website for a snack food company. And it's like, I can speak to that. That's the industry that I currently worked in. And, there are real results with this. So within 3 months of going to a user research specific meetup every week, I ended up landing a role. And it was in part through the connections that I made and the things that I learned through going to those events. And now I'm going to give you a networking tip. And if you see that little book in the corner, that's to let you know that's an original concept. So a solitude sandwich is a concept that I'd like to illustrate with another story. So I was giving this same talk when it was a little less robust. We have some additions since then. But I was giving the Networking for Introverts talk that became Confident Introvert the book. And there was Q&A at the end. And there was someone during Q&A that asked, so I'm curious why you were giving a talk about introversion when you are so obviously an extrovert. So I hear that question, and I take a slight pause, and I decided to answer the question with another question. And I asked, so what do you think I was doing before this event? And he said, you were probably out to dinner with friends. And I was like, no, I was actually out in the lobby reading for about an hour. And then I asked, so what do you think I'm going to be doing after this event? And he said, you're probably going to be going to an after party. And I was like, I'm not invited to the after party. I don't know about that after party, but I'm going to be going home and reading, journaling, meditating. That's actually something called the Daily 3-2-1 that I'll go into later, so you can do it too. But what this illustrates is that in order to be fully present when you're presenting, when you're at an event, give yourself that time, and maybe it's Texas toast. We're in Texas, very fitting, right? Or maybe it's like a, tortilla. It could be any type of bread, and that would be your solitude. And then in the middle, your peanut butter, your turkey, whatever you want in your sandwich is your event where you want to be fully present and you get to play around with different ratios. If you're going to a conference, maybe you actually want to have a full day before and a full day after to decompress in order to be fully present. So just have fun with it, right? And play around with putting, if you have a really important meeting or presentation at work, or if you're an entrepreneur, when you're out in the world, then block off your calendar so you can have that time to do something that is not, talking on the phone with someone or having a video call right before you need to have this presence. Now we're going to go into event prep from the inside out. So we've heard success is an inside job. It's also kind of an outside job too, so that's why we're going into both. So who remembers these shoes? They're actually making a comeback, the light up shoes. So who here likes to play around with their style? Who here is not into style? Okay, so I used to not totally be into style, and I realized this would be better illustrated if I was wearing something very bright, but I got my bright lip, okay? However, back in the day when I first started networking, I remember I was in the market for a new pair of glasses. And like many people, I thought, okay, let me get maybe silver, black, it needs to go with everything. It needs to be a neutral of some kind. But then I was scrolling through this website, and I saw a pair of bright pink glasses, and I was like, wow, those are so cool, but no. What will that go with? I can't even think of anything. One outfit that I have, it would really go with. So then, I scrolled on by, but I couldn't bring myself to buy any of the other glasses. They weren't speaking to me. And I literally dreamt of those pink glasses that night. And I was like, you know what? It's not rational, it's not logical, but I gotta give myself what I want here. So I ordered the glasses. And I started wearing them, as you do, before you get contacts. And then people at events started to refer to me as the woman in pink glasses. If they didn't remember my name, they remembered my glasses. And it wasn't something that I planned, but it became kind of cool because when people, have you ever wanted to maybe make an introduction? Or maybe someone was like, oh, I'll introduce you to so-and-so at this event, but then you lose each other and you don't find each other again. Imagine if you had a marker that was a little bit different so that you kind of stood out a little bit. And not necessarily to peacock and be like, look, I'm so different, this is so intentional. But if you get that experience or that feeling or that inkling like I did, where you're like, ooh, that's kind of weird. That's like different. But maybe it can be a marker to yourself, or a reminder like, okay, like this thing that I actually think is really cool, that's a little offbeat, like it gets to bring out a different side of you potentially. And this isn't fake it till you make it. I'm not an advocate of that at all. It's about uncovering what is already there. And now, who here has heard of power poses? Okay, who has not yet heard of power poses? Okay, so I'd like to encourage you to stand up right now and go ahead and take an expansive posture. Maybe you want to do, this pose. Maybe you want to do this pose. Just like take up a lot of space, like stretch a little bit if you feel like it. And during this whole slide, we're just going to stay like this. Just have fun. Just like be in your power pose. So Amy Cuddy wrote this book. I love this. Everyone is so confident right now. And it's called Presence. And she talks about this concept, or this study rather, of people in a job interview. And there was an A/B test. One set of people were in the waiting room, and they were just kind of like reading like a magazine or on their phone, kind of like legs crossed, like hunched over it. And then another group, they were reading a newspaper, super expansive. And when it came to being in the interview setting, the interviewer was asked, without knowing how they were in the waiting room, about how they showed up in the interview. The people who were reading the newspaper were perceived as more competent by the interviewer. So if you have some sort of social engagement where you would like to show up in a more confident way, allow yourself to take up space before. It could be in a waiting room, it could be in your car, it could be in the restroom. But do it for 2 to 5 minutes, and even if it feels silly, just allow yourself to be like, okay, like shoulders back, like this is me world, what's up? And just have fun with it. So yeah, I would encourage you to play around and find whatever expansive pose works for you, just knowing that you're doing it for enabling yourself to make the best impression, to have opportunities and doors open for you. All right, so feel free to take a seat. And now we're going to go into a combination of, the internal as guided by our external ways of being. So let's see, when it comes to our breath, usually it's pretty automatic. We're not thinking that much about it unless we're super stressed, and then we stop breathing. Who has ever realized, oh, I'm not breathing? Yeah, that has definitely happened to me before. And then I'm like, oh shoot, I should do that. That would be good. Because actually, it exacerbates your stress response when you stop breathing, because you're not getting oxygen to the brain. So imagine your less oxygenated brain trying to make decisions and feel good and be present, not gonna be working too well. So, and this is something that you can do even if you're at an event and you're starting to feel a little panicky. You're like, oh, that person looks at me weird. I don't love that. Oh, they don't like me. Like, what you can decide to do is breathe in through your nose, and then pause at the top, and then exhale audibly through the mouth. You can do this in a pretty subtle way, actually. But for our purposes, I would say, let's do this 3 times together. And I know it might even bring on a little yawn, but let's breathe in through the nose, filling up your belly and lungs all the way, and then hold that breath at the top. You can do 4 counts in your head if you'd like. And then you can exhale through the mouth, and don't be afraid to make a sigh or a sound if that's natural to you. Even if it's not, maybe just try it out. Next breath, then breathing in through the nose for 4 counts. And pause at the top, nice full belly. And then wringing out your belly and lungs for another 4 counts. Now breathing in through the nose again. Pausing at the top. And the biggest exhale yet, through the mouth. Who here feels more relaxed than they did a moment ago? So most, if not everyone. This is something that, when it comes to showing up as your best self at events, sometimes the anxiety or the jitters can get in the way, so it can make all the difference to literally do something that we normally are doing anyway, but just with greater intentionality. And now, I alluded to this earlier, but it's the daily 3-2-1. So you can do this. I do recommend first thing in the morning or last thing at night. I will say that doing this last thing at night, ideally tech-free, a paper book, a paper journal, and maybe you have an egg timer to set the timer for your meditation. And this really allows you to get into a restful state so you sleep better. And what I like to recommend, so it's called the daily 3-2-1 because it breaks down into 30, 20, and 10 minutes. So the average person reads 19 minutes a day. You're going to be ahead of the game with this if you do 30 minutes a day. And there are studies that suggest greater longevity in your life by reading more. There's a lot of positive research around reading. So if you want to read for fun, if you want to read self-help, if you are studying something, then that can be a part of that as well. And then, so that is your input, where you're okay, you're absorbing this information. And then your 20 minutes of journaling is your output, where this can also be referred to as narrative therapy, where you're just really allowing yourself to, anything that happened that day, or if there's a story on repeat. Who has ever had a story on repeat of something that happened and you're okay, I think about this a lot. If only that could not be going on in my head. So one way to allow that to stop repeating in your mind is to write it out on paper, because oftentimes the reason why we have rumination, repetitive thoughts, is because there's some lack of clarity around what happened. And maybe it's uncomfortable, so we think about it for a bit and then we stop. We're nope, don't like thinking about that. When really, if we give it the attention it deserves, then the power that it had over our thoughts begins to dissipate. So, you can journal about something that's on your mind. You can even journal about everything you're grateful for. Oh my gosh, if you journaled about everything you were grateful for in great detail, specifically from that day, not to be confused with writing the same exact list all the time, you could, but to really feel the emotion, this is very key. You will feel such a difference just in your happiness and wellness, just letting the positive things amplify. Because think about it, if let's say there's social anxiety at networking events, it compounds. It's not just one time that someone didn't receive us well, and we're oh, that's not great. It's it happened once, and then, oh, it happened again. Oh my gosh, this is my life, what the heck? When really, there are probably as many times where people were actually really welcoming and receiving you well, but your focus was on the other. So what we give our attention to is what affects our baseline, and then it impacts our reality of the things that we both observe and invite in future interactions. So then we kind of want to tie this together with an integrative piece, meditation. Who here meditates? Who here has ever meditated? Who here has never meditated? All right. Okay, we have a mix here. So, you can meditate using the breath of 4-4-4 that we went over, or I personally prefer a mindfulness meditation where you're not really structuring your breath. It's more about maybe setting an intention and clearing your mind and just relaxing, So we can even try that for 1 minute. If you'd like to go ahead, and you can either have your eyes closed or your eyes downcast, kind of zoning out, fixating on a space. If you want to go ahead and take a deep breath and then exhale, and I'd like you to observe your thoughts and just kind of wave them away. Imagine that your thoughts are balloons and they're going by, and you're just kind of waving them on. If they get a little stuck, that thought balloon, you're move along, thank you. So we'll do this for just about 1 minute, and I'm honored that this will be some of your first meditation experiences. Being in a space of non-judgment of yourself, of embracing that, yes, you're a human with thoughts, but they get to fly on by right now. All right, as you are wishing your next thought a nice flight, we're going to open our eyes again and re-enter the space. And this brings us to the Tech Free Code 111. So this is when I recommend that you unplug from technology. So who here is on technology every day? That's very normal. I pretty much am too, unless I'm very intentional about it, right? So my recommendation is that you spend 1 hour per day not on technology. And you can decide to do that however you want, but I personally recommend the daily 3-2-1. And then 1 day per week. Whoa. So how you can do that is by, let's say that you are going out into nature, going on a hike. It's not to say that you can't use your maps. I mean, that's next level though, if you just memorize, okay, like, or you MapQuest it, print it out, I don't know. But the idea is to just be intentional about your use of technology. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. And then 1 week per year. Who here has ever heard of Vipassana meditation retreats? Who here has ever done one? All right, well, I'll just share from my experience. I did one for 10 days once. Anyone can do one. So they're held all over the US, all over the world actually, and it's where any experience level, you just need to commit to like wanting to do it. And you're essentially meditating for 10 hours a day for 10 days. So, you know, I would say if you don't want to go to a retreat and have that experience at least once in your life, it is a different style. It's not mindfulness meditation, which is my preferred method. You are sitting very still the entire time. So, but then your breath can do whatever it wants, that sort of thing. So 1 week per year, maybe what that looks like is a staycation, you know, during a holiday break where you spend just a little bit extra time intentionally being off devices, putting your phone away, putting your laptop away, getting out a canvas and painting. What? There are so many different things that you could be doing that are not tech related. So I encourage you to get creative and see how you could spend 1 week of your life where you intentionally replace tech activities with more things like nature, more things like creative and artistic endeavors, interacting with people that you care about, that sort of thing. And this was actually one item that came up earlier, which was how do you start a conversation? So who has ever felt a little bit like, a little awkward, just going up to people and being like, hi, what's up? You know, just not knowing where to go from there. So these are some conversation starters by actually a fellow Austin local, Vanessa Van Edwards. She wrote a great book called Captivate. And these questions they include my favorite, what was the highlight of your day? And you know, you can feel free to take a picture of this. You can read, I'm not gonna read through all of them, but they have something in common. What I like to call, they are conversational sponges. So they're open-ended, and they absorb or they invite a lot more than what initially comes to mind, right? If you ask someone, hey, are you doing well? They say, yep. Oh, wow, great conversation. But if you're like, hey, so how is your day going, or what's the highlight? And the reason for not just asking, how was your day, and instead asking, what was the highlight of your day, is because you are positively skewing the conversation. So in essence, where a lot of people, you've probably had these conversations, they're so common, where people say, the weather, can you believe it? Can you believe it actually rained from the sky today? And then everyone's like, yeah, oh man, it just really made my life so much worse. And then everyone's commiserating and like bonding over that. Or what about traffic? Wow, like let's talk about this traffic. Let's give it a lot more time. Let's extend that experience of the traffic, right? No, like can we actually be a little more mindful and lead by example and decide to connect with people on positive topics? Because again, what you give your attention to, what you write, what you speak, you're allowing that to amplify. You're voting for it, essentially, like, hey, more of this, please. So intentionally asking people about positive things allows more of that to come into your life, and you get to be a positive presence that, guess what, people like to be around. What about when you are done talking, but then maybe someone else is not? Have you ever had that situation where you're like, wow, great, someone's really on a roll, but now I'm done with this conversation, but it's like I'm not in it. It's still happening. I'm just here. So, there are a few things that you can do. There are a few things that you can say. So one is, may I have your card? Or it was great meeting you. That if you even have cards, these days like digital can work, or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, but you don't need to connect with everyone. If you actually don't want to connect, you don't have to. And then this one, use this one very sparingly. Have you met so-and-so? Only if you're certain that this would be a fruitful connection for everyone involved. Don't just pass someone off for the sake of it. And then, maybe you want to have the nonverbal cue of glancing at your phone and saying it's getting late, I have to get going, but I'm glad that we could chat. So notice how that's not inviting connecting, where you don't need to necessarily make that connection happen. However, I would recommend that if you enjoy the conversation, or even if you feel neutral about it, go ahead and invite a connection and get their contact info, because if you don't get their contact info, then they could, let's say, have your card or your email and then just forget about it or lose it, and then a connection that could have been is not. And you can also say, well, especially, please don't say that you're going if you're not. So if you're going to continue to meet people, say something like, I promised that I'd circulate the room, can I get your card, or nice to meet you? There are so many different ways that you kind of can pause, but if someone is talking, you're not really seeing an opening to even say one of these lines, there is a nonverbal cue that you can initiate. So I'm going to make it super exaggerated, but this is a micro expression typically. It's where you raise your eyebrows and slightly open your mouth, like a fish or something. So do this in the mirror, and it could be kind of fun, but then you'll realize you can do this in a very slight way, and basically what it will do non-verbally, or subconsciously rather, it will have the person you're speaking with make you want to talk. They'll take a pause, So if all else fails, do some nonverbal cues to get people, or if you do it really exaggeratedly, they're probably still going to stop and be like, what's going on? So either way. And towards the end of the event, I can't state this enough. Always get someone's contact if you enjoyed meeting them. And also just have the awareness, not everyone wants to connect on Instagram. I know that's very popular these days. Some people do still keep their professional life, their personal life separate. So just kind of having that respect for that boundary if someone has it. And inviting someone to connect. And if someone doesn't seem open to it, just knowing that, okay, that is a personal choice, that it's great for you to be in contact and community with people that are open to you and celebrate you. And it's not going to be every single person, especially as you get to know more and more people. We'll go into this in the interactive exercise later, but I like to say about 90% of people that you meet, particularly at networking events, will be pretty open. And then the 10%, that's the 10% that sticks with us. Those are the people that just are not our people, that are not open, that are physically closed, that are kind of looking away from us, turning away from us. And, it really takes so much intentionality to really redirect your focus and to be in charge of your own energy and perception. And if you like talking with them, or if you like what they stand for, maybe what they do professionally, to maintain that positivity if it's authentic for you, where it gets to be oh, I still think that person's cool, they're not open to connecting, maybe they're going through something, and I'm going to redirect my focus. Okay, post-event, the art is in the follow-up. So this is for you if you've ever, let's say, gone to the event and you're like, wow, I'm so exhausted, I'm going to all the events, and nothing's happening. So maybe nothing's happening because you haven't yet initiated an effective follow-up strategy. So this is a template, and I know you might be like, whoa, that is detailed. But guess what? It's detailed because it works, and this is how you get meetings with people. So this is also, I didn't put it, it's in the book too. But so you want to start with a greeting, add a little bit of context, then a personal detail and something of value that you can add to their life. And then you also want to suggest a specific date, time, and location. And the reason for this is because it's so much easier for someone to say, oh, actually noon on a Thursday works, but not this week. How about next week? Or, like actually noon is never good for me, but, Thursday after work, I can meet before this event. So that sort of thing. So you're kind of giving someone an opening to be able to, let you know what works, what doesn't. So an example here would be, hi Phil, it was great meeting you at the mixer last week. And be specific. Why POSF mixer? The, whatever the mixer is, would love to hear how your pitch night went on Wednesday. That shows that you listened. You have a detail. Let's catch up over coffee or lunch. How about next Tuesday, the 27th, around noon in the financial district? So yeah, just kind of keep that in your back pocket. And if you're making one new friend at an event, this is one way that you can actually solidify the friendship and, and kind of just get to know them a little bit better. Ideally, when you're talking, you're not just talking about work-related things, but especially when you meet again, you can talk about those hobbies or, other things that came up. And I'd also like to encourage you to follow up within 24 hours. So if you go to an event, let's say it's 6 to 8, it's a pretty standard time. What you want to do is either that night, first thing in the morning, on your lunch break, just within 24 hours, you have the business cards, you have the LinkedIn requests, go ahead and send a personalized message to the people that you connected with and get something on the calendar for within 2 weeks. And the reason for this is, how often have you, let's say, reached out to someone and you're like, hey, I know things are probably busy, but anytime. And then it's just so vague that it doesn't happen. Or someone says, oh, this week is really busy. How about in 3 months? Probably not going to happen, right? So allowing to have that sense of urgency where it's more excited, it's just kind of like, oh, this is a person that I felt like I clicked with, so let's continue the conversation either virtually with a coffee chat or in person if they're local. And now we're going to switch gears a little bit into community building. So I know that I started community building before I was an entrepreneur. And, there are a few different ways that you can go about this. You can join existing organizations. So for example, I was on the board of directors of the Young Professionals of San Francisco for a time. And it's one of those things where I was attending the events pretty consistently. And then I applied to be on the board, and it was like a 2-round interview process. I made it to the first round, did not make it to the second. But guess what? I was like, nope, I really like them. I'm still going to continue going to the events, and I'm going to try again. So I tried again the next year, and then I became a brand ambassador. And then the next year, a manager. Then the next year, a director level, and then maintain the director level. And it's one of those things where, if there is an organization that you really like, go ahead and have an active presence, offer to volunteer. It also gives you a greater sense of purpose when you're at the event because you get to help kind of make sure the logistical flow is going well. You have a really good excuse to talk to anyone and everyone at the event, even more so than being an attendee. And yeah, it just kind of gives you a little bit of extra credibility, especially if you would like that for your business or for your career, where you're able to speak to, like, hey, I'm a part of something greater than myself. Here's an example. And also, you can create your own series. So I'll give an example of a series that I love hosting. It's called Women Creating in Real Life Community. And I hosted it in Austin for the first time in September. The next one is February 13th, Valentine's Day. And, it started out because I was going to so many events and meeting so many cool people and realizing, wait, I know a lot of these organizers, and sometimes they can be the unsung heroes where they're doing cool things, but they're behind the scenes. So I wanted to bring them front and center. And if other people wanted to, let's say, build out community and kind of learn from them. So, that's one example. But maybe there's an idea percolating for you. You're like, wait, this kind of person isn't really talked about enough. Or this, I would love it if an event had this type of activity. There's an opportunity there. You might not be the only person that's actually really interested in engaging in that way. So allow yourself to ideate. Like, what are some types of events that I've been to that I really liked, or maybe 2 types of events, and you can combine them. So, just let yourself kind of percolate with those ideas there. And, you can fill holes in existing market offerings or an existing organization. The sky's the limit when it comes to being creative, and especially when you partner with existing people that are, let's say, a little more established in the event space, where you can propose ideas potentially, if they're open to that. And also public speaking. So when it comes to public speaking, I remember this very talk. So this very talk came to me as an invitation. We don't always get invitations to create talks, but I was invited to give a talk, but I didn't have one because I had been hosting events for a while. A lot of my friends were organizers of events, just kind of in that space. And then one of my friends asked, "Hey, can you give a talk?" And I was like, "Okay, what do you want me to talk about?" She said, "Anything you're an expert in." So my question to you, if someone asked you to give a talk on something you were an expert on, what would you talk about? So that was a very real question that I had to answer. And I ended up realizing it's like, I don't know if I want to be known for networking, but I've done a lot of it. So it's something that I feel like I can speak to, where it's not it doesn't feel like I'm grasping for information. I feel really embodied in it, where I'm like, okay, I know this stuff. I can talk about it. And it doesn't feel like a huge deal to talk about it, the subject matter itself. And then I would encourage you, if you want to get into public speaking, to create a signature workshop, speaking from some experience here, and you can convert that into so many different types of talks. And whether you have a business, I would say everyone in this room has a personal brand. Whether you're aware of it or not, I know, day and age of social media, hello, we are all personal brands right now. And being able to identify what you stand for is so empowering, especially in this day and age, mass layoffs. I have clients these days that are reinventing themselves, either becoming entrepreneurs or plugging themselves back into a new company, that are creating elevator pitches that don't encompass a company name or title, where it's really such an opportunity to reinvent yourself and be like, okay, this is what I stand for. And maybe it takes a little bit of soul searching and identifying, if I were to create a career for myself that I enjoy, that is of value to other people, what would that look like? And starting out with just kind of getting clear on what that main thing is. And then from there, you get to create a tour schedule, identify your pricing model, and it gets to be a little involved, but a lot of fun. This is something that I also work with entrepreneurs on. So if this is of interest to you, feel free to let me know. And now, has anyone ever heard of this term expander? Okay, so an expander is someone who has done something that you want to do, or maybe someone who you're like, oh, so they used to be in that situation, and now they're in this situation. I'd like to be in this situation too, that they are now in. So an example of an expander is a past client of mine, Austin, and I wonder if you can relate to, she was considering a total career change and makeover. Have you ever been in a position where you're thinking, I want to do something different? Yeah. But have you ever felt like you were anxious or not really wanting to speak up in meetings, whether it be interviews, whether it be with, superiors or at networking events, you're like, I'd rather not talk that much. Have you ever kind of felt like that? I know I have, I know Austin had. So through our work together, she ended up ideating a strategy that worked for her to speak up in meetings way more often than she was before in a meaningful way. Right? And getting to a place where she actually ended up starting to interview and doing so well in the interview process with the confidence that she had built that she transitioned to a different company. Sometimes you can move up within an existing company, other times maybe they know you as a certain way, and you get to make a new name for yourself at a different company. So in her case, she had a multiple 5-figure raise at this new company, which also may be more challenging if you stayed at your current company. And she also went from associate to VP. So this just kind of lets you know, this is within a 6-month period. So if you've had these thoughts of I kind of wish that I was here instead, but wow, that feels far-fetched, or that feels like I probably need to accomplish a lot more before I do that, just know that quantum leaps are possible. I mean, not just with meditation, okay? Like, meditation is great, but with the proper support, with the proper mindset, and with taking actions that actually move you forward. And now, before we go into our interactive activity, we do have time for questions. If anyone has a question that maybe they came in with, or maybe it's something that has just come up, so feel free to raise your hand while I'm talking right now if you have a question that has come up, and we can address that. And I know that this is a lot of information that we're going over, and if there aren't questions at this point in time, you can feel free to let me know a little later if something comes up. But I'd like to invite you to stay connected. So I'm going to bring this slide up one more time after this. But so there are a few different things. I love to offer people what I call clarity sessions. They can also be networking strategy sessions. Like, what's a blind spot? How can you maximize your networking opportunities in a way that you haven't before? So these are one-on-one sessions that I'm offering if you are attending virtually, or like literally right here, right now in person. Hello. So yeah, you can go to calendly.com/Stephanie Thoma/clarity, and that will be about a 25-minute call where we'll be able to illuminate some sort of a blind spot. And then if we could be in working together, then we'll talk about that as well. There's no obligation in the call. It's really about getting one nugget of wisdom that you get to take with you. And there are books for sale in the back, Confident Introvert, based on hosting all those events, going into what we've talked about, but also more, because it is a book. So you can go ahead and get a free chapter of that book, the chapter dedicated to introversion. It's chapter 2, I want to say, at stephaniethoma.com/freebie. So that's just a free gift. If you're like, I kind of want to read a little bit of that book. And now we are about to enter our activity where we get to be interactive, even more so than we have. So we're going to go over a few different networking approaches. So one is the solo networker. Then we're going to go into approaching a group of 3, and I'll let you know why it's not a group of 2. And then large groups, and then the speaker. Okay, so a reason for approaching a solo networker is because maybe they feel a little bit awkward too, and I would actually encourage you to attend networking events by yourself. That could be counterintuitive. Some people think, I need someone with me because I feel kind of uncomfortable if I don't have someone with me, when really how you can build confidence at events is when you have no one to lean on, and you just got to go out there, So I would encourage you, and I know some people show up in groups, some people show up by themselves, but I do recommend, for the purposes of networking, it can be really powerful, or at least if you show up with, a friend, to say, okay, during this event, I want to strengthen our relationship, this is important, but I also want to make a new friend, so maybe let's part ways for a little bit to meet some new people. And you also you get to direct the focus on making them feel more comfortable. Especially, this can be a really great redirect if you tend to feel self-conscious. Think about self-conscious, being conscious of the self. It's great to be self-aware when we're aware of ourselves and how we're showing up, but being super conscious, hyper-fixated, it's not helpful to anyone. So being able to redirect the focus and be like, okay, this person, how can I help make them feel more comfortable? Then you will naturally feel less self-conscious because you're redirecting your focus. And again, you get to ask those open-ended questions. So we're actually going to start right now with this group activity. And I'd like everyone to stand up. And someone that you didn't come up with, someone that you have not spoken with yet, I'd like you to go up to one person and just start a conversation, say hi, and we'll just have a minute or two, so just know this is not the full, you're not going to connect as deeply as you would at a standard event, because this is an exercise, but yeah, go ahead, you can start that now, and I'll let you know when it's time to move on.
Nice to meet you. Introverted,
We might have one group of 3 with an odd number, so you're totally welcome to join if you are not finding a match.
Yeah, this is
I attended 2 of those.
Yeah.
Those are actually pretty nice. I also attended the resume building.
I wish I'm on a job, so it's like, yeah, I wish I had that.
Is that one of the programs that started off in order?
What are you looking to get into?
I'm a software developer, so I do front-end development.
Yeah, started off doing like, yeah.
UX design over here.
Oh, sweet. My partner's UX here. I love that science. I wish I could do that.
Now we do more.
It's like some of it is aesthetic, some of it is like research, and then you actually what I'm doing with my job right now is all I'm doing is I'm tallying like interactions that are going on.
Oh, yeah.
It's like it's like I'm actually a cashier over at the convention center in their parking garages, and one of the things they say is, oh, if you know customer service, you can use UX. So that's my whole thing. So yes, you can do it. You just kind of have to find a way to work it out.
Yeah, I start tomorrow. My friend's flying in from, my other friend's like,
Dude with software.
I don't want to go, but I do it.
So I was a huge fan. I started
To the first Starship kind of launch. It is a pretty cool spot.
But I learned JavaScript on the web, so eventually I used to do that.
I feel like yours right now is kind of still really
Good choice. So I'll do I can hear back and stuff as well. But the
yeah.
Like I know some HTML and CSS that's for responsive design. I did learn a little bit of JavaScript, but that was like I did one.
Right.
So it's definitely changed. I tried to learn Python.
30 more seconds.
It was really crazy.
It's really different. Coding is like the first thing that you have to go through something 10 times before.
Yeah, like I tried going into like information technology or like UX, and I couldn't even last year in the program. I was like, before I switched over, it's like, oh my god, it's like I get coding is important, and I kind of imagine it, but I don't really have engineers.
It's dry. It's some topics. I always tell people that you never get that time.
All right, we're going to pause the conversation, wrap up that last thought, and we are going to stay standing, but I'd like you to get into groups of 4. So if you want to go ahead and get in groups of 4 while you stay standing, then we're going to move on to the other approach. But yeah, staying standing because we're in the interactive portion right now, but groups of 4.
Groups of 4.
Yeah, so it'll make sense in a moment.
Wait, let's mix it up.
So while we get in groups of 4, but just know that we're going to, so when you're in a group of 4, I would like you to not say hi to people just yet.
You know what? I'll make someone
All
else.
right, so if you can hear my voice, clap once. Thank you, yay. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. Actually, what's better, if you can hear my voice, say hi.
Hi.
Okay, stop. Thank you. Okay, so I know we're not doing the exercise just yet, so we're gonna pause. I know, it's okay. I know, it's like you're on a roll. So the reason why I'm recommending groups of 4 is because we're going to take turns. We're gonna have, you're gonna count off, not now, but 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then like people that are number 1 are gonna come up here, and there's gonna be a group of 3. And the reason for a group of 3 and not a group of 2, some of you did experience entering the group of 2, and that can work out sometimes. Other times, you could be entering a conversation where there really isn't space for a third wheel, right? However, when there are 3 people in a group, there's an opportunity that maybe there's one person that's a little less engaged. You know, there's just a greater likelihood of being welcomed into that group. And this is something that you'll begin to notice once I tell you this. So there's this great book called Croissants versus Bagels by Robbie Samuels. He's another author in the networking space. And basically he says you want to, so this is how you can be more inclusive and help other people know that they can enter your circle by not making it a circle, making a croissant. So what you want to do is, let's say that there's one person here, one person here, one person there. What you want to do is look for the biggest gap between people when you are going up to a group of 3. And it could be exaggerated. Like, that would be super exaggerated. If it was just like one person here and one person there, like, well, yeah, obviously, you come right here. Usually it's more subtle. Usually there's maybe a little gap that's a little bit bigger. You can kind of look at people's feet and determine the biggest gap between feet. And then what I want you to do is, let's say that you see this group of 3 over here, and you've identified, okay, the biggest gap, you're looking from afar, is right here. You're like, that's where I go. And you walk up, and you're not going to immediately enter the group as close as everyone else is. You want to be invited. Doesn't it feel, who likes to be invited? I love being invited. So what you can do is not say anything right away, because you're respecting the space. Maybe someone is in the middle of saying something, and guess what? They might even keep talking and smile at you because they're like, thank you for not cutting me off by saying hi, like so many people do. So there's the gap. You're on the outskirts of the gap, like not quite in as close as everyone else, just a little bit on the outskirts. And then you're just kind of like a little smile, making eye contact with everyone in the group. And you might even find that someone is not comfortable with you not being included, so they'll interrupt everyone for you and invite you in, like, oh, hey, what's your name? You know, that's pretty common. Or, you know, there's the person that smiles, they keep talking, and someone may ask you a question, or other times, you know, especially if people are making eye contact with you, then you get to find an opening where someone says something, and you're like, oh yeah, you know, that reminds me of this, or, you know, you get to kind of interject yourself. However, I mentioned this earlier, 10% of the time you will be completely ignored. Like, this is what definitely happened to me, where you walk up and you could do everything right. You could be like on the outskirts, you could be kind of like pleasantly smiling, making some eye contact, but you realize these people don't want to talk to me. Like, and it's not actually in your head or anything. You're like, it's very clear. Like, they keep talking, they keep not looking at me. Like, wait, it's been an extended period of time now. So give it enough time. But if you're not even getting the nonverbal cues after, 30 seconds, a minute, like, do a little more than you're comfortable with if you're new to this, just so that you don't peace out too soon. But I would say if it becomes very clear that no one is making eye contact and there really isn't an opening, you can tell yourself, well, that's the 10%. And there's no need to say goodbye because you did not say hello. You just get to kind of gracefully bow out and tell yourself, okay, that's the 10%. I'm so excited for the 90%, you know, where you're going to be well received and welcomed. So what I'd like to have you do now, and many of you are in groups of 4, I wonder how, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we might have, yeah, so you know what, everyone's gonna get an opportunity. So get in a group of 4, and then we're gonna have, we're gonna make this work. Count it off 1 through 4 or 1 through 5. And then I want the number 1s up here, please. So if you're in your groups, okay, so I can even do it, if that makes it easier. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm just gonna go over here first. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, let's see, we're gonna have each of you kind of, you're gonna stay with me with the number 1s and number 5s, come with me. And number 3s, feel free to, you can be an obvious croissant or a less obvious croissant, you know, however you feel like it would be at an event. And I'd like you all to just, you know, start talking. Just start talking amongst yourselves. And then you're number 5, so you can come up here if you'd like. Yeah. So we have groups of 3, so you're talking, getting acquainted. And we can all talk up here, number 1s.
online, I do it like user experience, a lot of user experience. I'm an introvert. Oh, is this your first time you want to do that?
Yeah.
I haven't in a while. Yeah, for sure. Like the networking, for that was probably I know. Type of events, for networking. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I've only been in Austin for like 3 years. My immediate thought was like, I can't wait for to see someone else do it like at this event. You know? Direct from Seattle, but from oh yeah, yeah, I don't mind this personally, but it was so hot. Hello, what's your name? Nice to meet you. Oh yeah. I was sent out as a soldier. I'm Chad. Aaron, nice to meet you. Lucas. So, with this group, yeah. How about y'all? Right now, yeah. So sweet. Do you have a favorite so far? Hear about everything.
Okay, number 2, exit the group, please. Everyone else can keep talking, except for the number 2. Sorry, you're coming with me. And everyone else can keep talking.
Cool.
little bit more skill in government, marketing, communications.
Yeah,
But
for
in
sure.
mathematics, I had a former tutor graduate student that could do things like UX designers.
And how long were you?
Go and see her grading was a year and a half ago. So
What made you like
That's actually
decide
what,
to
that's actually my bachelor's was like,
kind of jump in like
like,
that?
I've got a lot of experience, and I just kind of stuff that out.
It's fun. It's great.
Yeah.
And where do you stand like here?
It's just right.
congrats. Oh, I started. Three weeks ago. Oh no, I'm free. Sorry. 3 weeks. From San Diego. It's about a year. Oh my god. Educational, there you go.
Number 3, so one person from every group. If you are number 3, it's time to exit the group and come over here. And you two can Okay, this group over here, who's number 3? One person, let's exit the group. If you haven't yet exited the group, then maybe decide one person is going to come over here.
I don't think I made
Oh, what did we decide?
It's in the name tag. Sorry. Are you from Austin? I am from Philly. Philly. Yes. Very rarely are people actually from Austin. Yeah. From networking now. Oh, from the word government. Maybe government.
In art, actually, it was
I think it sounds like I like the 3-2-1 thing. I think I really should do that. I think the idea of like and I really like how like seemingly natural like networking is, but not like
There you go. You're like, that's what I just did, yeah. For it and see and
So yeah,
when working like me, yeah. So it's like, what's your real
Okay, person number 4, one person for every group. If you haven't yet come over here, it's time to come over here. Person number 4. Everyone else can continue talking. Number 4s. And okay, so this group we have a number 4. Please come over here if you have not yet come over here. And has anyone who's still standing here, have you not come over here? Has anyone not come over here who's still out? Okay. Okay, then, so the idea is everyone will ideally get a chance to go out and enter a group. So please, mingle, continue.
That's what I did. Literally, I Airbnb off, and then I found a place to lease, and I came downstairs, and they were like, and I was like, per day. You miss coming really quickly to Spain.
my brother just got hired. Amazing. I have a friend that moved there. I visited him actually. Walking everywhere, wedding awesome. Yeah. My brother was saying like the work culture is pretty sweet too. It's great. Takes lots of breaks, ton of breaks. Yeah. Long lunches. Oh yeah. Dinner stuff with him. Yeah. Interesting. That's cool.
I like got really convinced that I was like, I have like last few things that I want, really like my laptop and face wash. They're like the two most important things, and then like your clothes. Thankfully, everywhere had a washer and dryer, which is huge. I learned by the way. It was really fun. I think now that I'm in one place, and also like I kind of miss the junk because I would be like, I would be super close like to this coffee shop, and like super close to this place, and I was constantly trying something.
It's fine that you're small implementing company got more precise. Wow. They could have put sparkly water,
There was
and you
such
kind of
a
got
variety.
more.
Yeah. Such a variety, like unexpected of like